Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Verdict podcast. I am Linus, Lampe, the Triple L, and I am co-hosted by my favourite person in the law cohort, Ed Dempsey. Introduce yourself, Ed. Today, we have a very special episode, but before we begin, we must mention a few amazing opportunities. If you have a dream, if you want to fight them on the beaches and you want to become the next best public speaker, well, let me tell you about the Public Speaking Society run by PAV. Also has Emmanuel, Patricia, and Nana on the council. Is a fantastic opportunity to get over your stage fright. But that's not the only special thing we have to announce for you today. Mooting is beginning with the Flamang Society, and Anton Doyle, our own communication director, is running it. Ed, do you want to tell them about Mooting?
Yeah, it's a great way to get involved in the legal career as looking towards your future. It simulates a courtroom, and you just get to learn really interesting things about how you deal with day-to-day life as a barrister, or sometimes we run solicitor roles alongside it if you're interested in that as well.
You can find everything you need to know about the verdict on our Instagram. The link will be in the description. Please follow our YouTube channel. Now, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a friend and associate of Exeter, one of the most interesting people that I've ever met. He can keep a conversation flowing like the next man, unless the next man is me. It is Daiman Baker, ladies and gentlemen. Daiman, hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, listeners. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Ed and I, Ed's had a better night last night than I have, haven't you, Ed?
It was, it was a little bit, fuzzy, but it's fine now.
So you were in Dallas earlier this month, or last month, I believe.
Literally last week. But before we jump into Dallas, please remind me to talk to you about moot court. What I did some moot court when I was in law school, and when you mentioned that, it set off a few memories.
We definitely will talk about moot court. So what was, you went to university. Talk to us a bit about your uni experience, because obviously our listeners, love hearing uni experiences and all the barcles and the shenanigans that go on at uni.
How much time do we have, right?
Not enough, I'm sure.
So, because you guys know, and your listeners might not, let me just give a little bit background on who I am. So Daiman Baker, I grew up in Los Angeles. And when I was maybe 17 years old is when I decided which particular university I was going to go to. So in California, we have what's called the UC system. You have UCLA, UC Berkeley. My school was UC San Diego. It's in La Jolla, and we were about 1 kilometer away from one of the best beaches in California. And I had started surfing about a year before that. So I chose UCSD.
We'll get onto surfing. Believe you me. We're at uni in Cornwall, so it's a big deal here in Cornwall. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Yep. So, and actually, I'm going to tell you, and I'll tell you the story of literally the moment. I mean, like the moment in time when I chose UCSD, because it's something that has stuck with me, and it's a bit of a theme in my life. So I was 17, and I had been visiting other college campuses. So I was only looking at 4 schools at the time. I was looking at Stanford, UCLA, UCSD, and USC. And I was on a walking tour of UC San Diego. And at the time, it was, or still is, in the middle of a big eucalyptus forest. But at the time, the forest was a lot larger than it is now. Anyway, so we're walking down this one street, and they were pointing out some things over in the buildings. And I was looking the opposite direction. There's a bit of a theme there, right? I was looking the other direction from everybody else, and I saw a guy on a mountain bike. And he was winding his way through the eucalyptus trees. And at one moment, he hit a jump. And honestly, you guys, it was like time stood still. I was so focused on this guy on the bike, and I was mesmerized by him. And he hit the jump, and as soon as he landed, I was like, this is where I want to come to school. I just want to be in this environment, because his freedom was something I wanted for myself. So I chose UCSD, and few decisions in my life, there's only a few decisions I really know I got right. And that was one of them. One of the best schools in the country, very heavily focused on like hard sciences and mathematics and economics. And in the US, most schools are 4 years. I was at UCSD for 5 years because I loved uni that much, but I learned a tremendous amount. So I'll tell you about what I majored in, and then I'll move on to law school. So when I started off, I was an engineering major. So I was taking, physics and chemistry and calculus. That was one of my minors, in fact, calculus. And I didn't have the study. I didn't have the hardcore commitment to studying that a lot of my colleagues did in the engineering course. And, I was partying, having a good time and experiencing that freedom, right? So I ended up,
I bet.
It was, what do you do when you're 17 years old, right?
Yeah,
so,
of course.
I ended up shifting to economics. And I'm really glad I kept economics as a major. So in the US, a lot of schools, you have a major and one minor, but I ended up keeping 2 minors. So I majored in economics, I was a minor in calculus, and I kept a minor in philosophy because I like practical application of education. And I love logic and arguing. And that's where philosophy came in. I was really understanding schools of thought, and that was really compelling. So I stayed with a philosophy minor. It was only until 4th year of college or uni that I decided I want to go to law school. But law had always been on my mind, honestly, ever since I was about 8 years old, because I like to argue with people, not just other students and stuff, but teachers. That was something that really, as you can imagine, right? You get, some 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old teacher, and I'm like an 8-year-old kid arguing with them. And a lot of times they didn't like that. And they would say, you'd make a really good lawyer. And they'd say it in a pejorative sense. But one day it kind of stuck. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I would make a good lawyer. Better than elementary school teacher, that kind of a thing. And so that was on my mind. Like I said, 4th year in college is when I really decided to take it seriously. And once again, with regard to decisions that I don't regret, I know I got that one right as well. I mean, and we can get into more detail later, but I think being a lawyer, being a student of the law really means you're dedicating your life to learning. And that to me that leads to a very rich and a very rich existence.
What do you think that the modern day lawyer needs skill-wise?
Wow. It has changed, I think, on the periphery. So there's a core set of skills every lawyer, I think, needs to have and does learn in law school. One of the things, at least we're taught in the US, is understand what the issue is. What is the issue? That's the key. Once you can isolate the issue, then you can apply the right law to that issue, and then you can kind of analyze and come up with a conclusion. But it's really quick thinking. Other people can get to the issue as well. It's just lawyers, I have kind of found, and this is a general statement, we tend to get to the issue quicker than other people. Doesn't mean we're smarter than them or anything like that. It's just we've been trained to isolate whatever it is as the most important thing to deal with in the moment. It's almost like triage in a medical sense, right? And
you're actually echoing exactly what the Clifford Chance lawyer said to us the other day. He said getting to the issue is something that most people can do, but the skill of a lawyer is they get to the issue very quickly and they're very good at identifying where the issue is exactly in a matter of, however long it takes. And then solving the issue is where the legal stuff actually comes in. Identifying it is just the, initiation stage of a job of a lawyer, really.
That's right. That is the beginning of it. And what, think about the skills kind of behind that. What is it, what skills are you employing to get you to isolate an issue? One is we learn focus. I think we are pretty good at understanding context as well. And there's also a compartmentalization piece that comes in. So by that, I mean, if we're only focused on spotting the issue, oftentimes, and this is a skill that I'm going to talk about, right? Oftentimes we miss the more human element. So it's, did John rob Bobby? Yes or no? Well, yeah, but, did Bobby beat him up the week before? I mean, what's the context in that? And one of the things I really think, not just older lawyers like me, younger ones like you as well, need to focus on is that human element. What are the soft skills that need to be employed? Empathy is a real big one. I think that's absolutely essential because having a finely honed sense of empathy is going to help you serve your clients a lot better. That's one. The other is on the business side of things. Linus, love the suit. You're looking great. Ed, can't really see you so well. You're backlit. What's going on?
He's hungover. It's probably for the best.
There you go. I got you. But it's really on the business side of things. And, I am maybe a rare breed in that I'm not only a lawyer, I've got, I'm licensed in the state of California to practice law, but I also have an MBA. And I went to business school, I'd say 5 years after I graduated law school. And I have found, at least for me, that's a very powerful combination of degrees. Now, what do I do with it? That's on me. But having law, having business as a background, for me, it has enabled me to look at the world in a different way and spot opportunities where others might not. But it means I'm constantly learning in two areas, I think, essential to lead a positive life.
Well, that's really really insightful. I think what you've said is applicable to many of the listeners that will be listening, because I think people quite often talk about, okay, so we need to learn acceptance, intention to make legal relations consideration. And that's great. And, the smartest 1% in a law degree will just get a first the whole time and stuff like that. But what you're not actually always getting measured on, what your end grade doesn't say, is your ability to make, create actual legal relations. So to create networking opportunities, to talk to clients, to make sure you do exercise empathy when dealing with tough situations. So I think that's, advice that people should heed who are listening. So you left law school, and then let's move into your, kind of field of work. What was your first kind of career, starting opportunity that you got, and how did you get it?
Yep. So actually, I'm going to tell you a little story, because it also puts it in context, right?
Oh, brilliant.
I like my stories, so I'm sorry.
It's story time.
Law school in the U.S. is 3 years, 3 academic years. You have 2 summers. What most law students do is they try to find an internship at a law firm so that they can work in the summer, 1 or 2nd summer, and then get a job offer when they graduate. Similar to when we were doing the walking tour at UCSD, everybody's doing one thing, I'm looking the other direction, right? And so for me, I wanted to do something completely different. And in the US, at least at my law school at the time, they had what was called a summer law program. And during half of the summer, they would take a group of students, in our case, to Oxford, to, where did I stay? At Univ College. So they put us up in the University College dorms in Oxford. We had 2 classes, one that was taught by one of the law professors from my school, and I went to SMU, which is based in Dallas. And then the other class was taught by an Oxford tutor. And I had one of the best summers of my life, not just on the learning side of things. I was in Oxford. It's a fantastic place to be to learn. But the way that students in Oxford learn the law is very different from the way we in the US learn it. In the US, it's lecture-based. You read your cases, you come in, they employ the Socratic method. I don't know if you guys have that here. You know what that is?
Reading the facts of the case or stuff like that, or no?
No, Socratic method is a little bit different. It's more confrontational. So imagine a class of about 100, 110 students in an amphitheater setting, right? At the bottom is the professor, and he or she has a seating chart in front of him or her.
Oh, yes.
Not just the seating chart, but our pictures are on it.
Oh,
right?
no.
Oh, yeah. And it's like trial by fire, right? So you have your nightly assignment of reading cases. You come in prepared to recite the facts and understand what, what's the issue, what's the rule of law, what's the applicability, did the court get it right or wrong, and why or why not, right? And the professor will be like, okay, Mr. Lampe, am I saying your name right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Tell me, do you think, the lower court or whatever, appellate court got the judgment or the ruling right in this case? Why or why not? And then they just grill you for however long they want to. But part in the Socratic method is not just that little bit. It's really, okay, that's great. That's really interesting, Mr. Lampe. But what about you, Mr. Dempsey? Do you agree with him? Yes or no? Or you, Miss Smith, you think these guys got it right? And so the Socratic method is really about bringing others into the conversation to really analyze different viewpoints.
It reminds me of the film. I think they showed it. I think it was about Harvard Law School, actually, with Tim Bottoms. The Paper Chase. Yes, that's it. I'll get my editors to click that in, a bit of it in.
Mr. Hart, what damages do you think the doctor should pay? What did the doctor promise?
There was a promise to fix the hand back to the way it was before it was burned.
And the result of the operation?
The hand was much worse than before he went to the doctor.
How should the court measure the damages? What should the doctor pay the boy?
But no, brilliant scene where the old lecturer is basically grilling about law of contract on Tim Bottoms. Yeah, right. Fantastic.
Nailed it. If I remember, he nailed it. You got it quite right. But it's it is confrontational. It's intimidating, but it's a great training ground. Mm. Yeah. So, where were we going with that one?
The difference between how it is in America with teaching to how it is in the UK.
Yeah,
that's right. And so I liked both methods. I mean, it was a little scary. I had the sweaty palms and all that kind of stuff when they called me a few times. And it was so different in Oxford. So in Oxford, at least with the Oxford tutor, it was the tutorial method, which is there were 6 students in the class. And we would go to, it turned out to be a guy, but we would go to his office and we would just sit and talk about what we had read that week. And there wasn't confrontation. It was exploratory in nature, but it was a lot more collegial. Mm. And I found that I learned more because I was involved in a conversation as opposed to trying to posture and pose in an intimidating environment with 100 of my peers judging me.
Mm. I agree. I think Ed and I know that the way the lecturers teach us, we'll have a lecture and they don't actually like to ask us any questions or talk to us. They want to get through this content. Mm. So when we have done our reading, we get to this seminar, 30 minutes of it at least, is just a general conversation about a case. And we do have the do you agree? And why do you say that, Mr. Dempsey? And but it's just a bit different, and you do learn quite quickly and also learn outside of just the case and the implications it has on other cases and judgments, which I think is interesting. So what do you prefer?
I like the tutorial method. I really did. I said, I found that I learned a lot more and it just stuck. And that's me. That's my learning style. That's my, that's my personality. Some people like the confrontational bit. Some people were training to be trial attorneys. And so they love the Socratic method. So that was summer number 1 in Oxford. I don't know if we even talked about this before, you guys, but back in the mid-90s, so it was the summer of 94, there was a guy named O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson doesn't need much of an introduction. O.J. probably is one of the best football players that ever played this game, and last week he announced his retirement. But he's been doing a lot of acting, so I'm sure that he's going to continue to be in the public eye.
The Los Angeles police are now searching for him. Simpson has been charged with 2 counts of murder, with 2 counts, that is, for the murder of his ex-wife and her male friend.
Right, so you remember the O.J. Simpson trial?
I watched the documentary. Yeah.
Okay, so brilliant. The lead lawyer on that was a guy named Johnny Cochran. At the time, my dad knew Johnny Cochran. And I met Cochran and Carl Douglas, who was one of the other attorneys on the case who worked in Cochran's office. I met them the summer of 94. No, it was the summer of 95 because I'd already done 1 year law school. So I'd done my Oxford program, came back to the US, met them, and they invited me to one day of the trial. And this was in the summer of 95. So 94 was when it all went down, I think. And then 95 was the trial. And so I told everybody I knew, I was like, I'm going to go to one day of the trial. And so, on CNN, it's like my mom, my aunt, all these friends of mine in LA saw me walk through the media blitz into the courthouse. And if we have a few minutes, I'll go through that day because it was a real trip for me, man.
Oh, we'd love that. Yeah. Please do.
So I'm just going to take a step back in time. So, I met Cochran and Douglas, and they said, hey, you want to come to one day of the trial? Fine. They locked it in. I then arrived at their offices that morning, and there were 2 other law students. There was a woman from, I think, Berkeley, so Bolt Hall, and it was a guy from Hastings, which is also a good law school up in San Francisco. And the 3 of us, I think maybe it was one other person, but anyway, the 3 of us jumped into, and I swear to goodness, at the time, Cochran drove a purple Rolls Royce.
Who else did he represent? Didn't he represent?
He had the other big celebrity murder trial that he had was Todd something. He was a guy on a show called Different Strokes.
Yeah, I wish my father was here. He'd be able to rattle off his name, but I don't know.
Yeah, but he was like a relatively famous child.
Yeah.
And he'd been accused of killing somebody in a crack house in LA, and Cochran got him acquitted. So we jump in the back of the rolls. We drive out to downtown LA, which is where the big courthouse was. On the way up, we're driving along one of the streets, really close to the courthouse, remember? And there was another lawyer walking up the street, and it was F. Lee Bailey, which was kind of like an older white guy with glasses, I remember. Yeah. So, hey guys, we'll see you inside. So we go around to the front, and that's where the big media blitz was. So we go through the media blitz. We go upstairs. The security was pretty tight. And one of the things I remember about this is they took my California driver's license, they looked at my ID, but then they retained it because I wasn't getting that thing back until I left. So I guess they were really controlled about, number one, who could go in, but they also didn't want anybody doing anything untoward. So they knew who you were. So we go in, and it was the first couple of hours, I remember, they were trying to see what evidence they could admit. So the jury wasn't in yet. So it was the defense team, prosecuting team, and they were submitting, offers of evidence, offers of proof, I think they're called. And if the judge allowed it, then it became a part of the evidence pack that the jury would then have access to. And the day, I remember the day that I went, because there was this Indian doctor who was going to be giving evidence that day. And he said his name, and then he said his name for the court. And he had this really long name. So at some point in my life, I'm going to look through some of the old videotapes of that day of the OJ trial, because it should be pretty easy to find, Indian doctor testifying. And then I remember where I was sitting. I was kind of in the front row of the gallery, as it were. And I was on the far left-hand side. So if you're the judge, you look out at the people. I'm on his right-hand side. He came out of our left. So he came out of the judge's right, stage left, I guess you'd call it. And when he came out, he looked at his daughter and he kind of nodded at her. And then he looked at me, and I guess he thought I was the boyfriend or something. So he nodded at me something. So he nodded at me too. Hey man. And I'm like, oh, hey. Yeah. The juice nodded at me. Oh yeah. I gave him a little, hey man, what's going on? I'm there with Cochran. I'm there with his defense attorneys. Now I'm going to go off on a slight tangent, because I know a lot of people get sensitive. How could you support a guy who killed these people? And it's okay.
Well, he was acquitted in a court of law, so
right. But there, public opinion was very divided at the time. Everybody knew that he did it, right? And everyone knew, but that's not the point of a criminal trial, right? The prosecution has its burden of proof, and if they don't meet that proof, the defendant gets acquitted. That's it. Now, whether or not he did it, that's on him, right? But if they don't prove their burden, what can anybody do? It's
so what do you think? Do you think he did it?
I think he did it. But, so what? What does it matter?
The glove didn't fit. The glove didn't fit.
It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Yeah, the glove didn't fit. Yeah. But, people get all wrapped up about this stuff. Oh, he did it. It's like, okay, yeah, but we have this system for a reason. Why? Because the last thing we want is for the state to engage in summary executions because everybody knows he or she did it. That's the last thing you want. We've seen that in history. It's not a good place to be. So what you do is you have your system. If the system is flawed, you figure out ways to fix the system. We don't want vigilante justice ever. So that's my little bit on the prosecutor failing to meet its burden in this case. If he did it and everybody knows it, why didn't you guys do a better job? Oh, he played the race card. You know what? I'm glad, because that is what a criminal defense attorney is supposed to do. He's not supposed to play a fair game. He's supposed to take every lawful step he can or she can to acquit his or her client. And so this crap about playing the race card, it's like, I look at it this way. If Mark Furman, which is the one who was using the N-word a lot during that time, if he hadn't have dealt a race card, Cochran and the defense team wouldn't have had it to play. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. If racism did not exist in our society, people who are victims of racism wouldn't cry foul.
I think we'll get on to race in a second, but I just wanted to say
I
that
went off on that tangent.
if anyone is interested in watching the O.J. Simpson recreation of trial, it's on Netflix. O.J. Simpson versus the People, very good. I highly suggest it. So getting onto race, what you've just been in America, what's it like over there at the moment with regards to everything? I mean, not just race, COVID, the political climate in general. What did you see?
I was in Dallas on business for I landed back in the UK on it was Saturday, so I was there for like a full week. And I had done 2 years in Dallas. I did my last year of law school in LA because I knew I wasn't going to live in Dallas. So when I graduated, seriously, I was just like, no, there's no way. So I went back, and I've been back to Dallas a few times, to visit colleagues and sometimes for business over the last few years. And so I went back, a little bit of trepidation on this trip, admittedly, because I'm not a fan of Trump. And I just thought Texas is normally a red state. Wow, talk about going into the hornet's nest. And so I tried to be cool, going with a somewhat open mind, but I had a little bit of trepidation. And I was pleasantly surprised by how few references I saw to Trump. Now, I was in a bubble because I was there meeting other lawyers, meeting other people in a business context. But I engaged with a few people who weren't part of my circle. I engaged with some white people who weren't part of my circle. And we talked openly about what it was like to live, in a Trump America, what it was like for me to be living in the UK. And a majority Tory government and COVID, absolutely. So visually, what did I notice? I noticed a lot of people your age not wearing their masks.
Oh, no.
In America, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, when you've got a president that says, we're just going to infect disinfectant in our arms, and, I can't expect them to, truthfully take COVID seriously, to be perfectly honest. But we here in the UK, I mean, I know for a fact Ed is an avid social distancer, and so am I.
Well, yeah, I think generally young people are doing quite a good job in the UK. I know we get uni students.
Right, let's calm down. The cases are going up, like,
yeah, but I know uni students are getting blamed by Boris Johnson. But yeah, I personally think we're doing quite a good job. It's actually just a system failure on behalf of the whole population.
I think. And another point I'm going to make about what I saw in the U.S. And hey guys, sorry, but testing over here is a shambles. So one of my coworkers, and no joke, on like the Wednesday night, she called us or sent an email around saying, "I tested today and I'm positive. You guys need to get tested." I was like, oh, great. So Thursday, I went onto Google. I typed in rapid response COVID testing. A number of centers popped up within about a 20-minute Uber ride from where I was in Dallas. I picked one. I paid $200. I waited for about 15 minutes for them to see me. They stuck the swab up. 20 minutes later, I had my results.
What?
Really?
But for $200, we've got to make that clear. You see, in England, it's free. And some people can talk about that as an issue. The NHS, I'm not going to get into that. But yeah,
it's free, but we're also in Cornwall, which makes it kind of hard because there's only one major hospital near us. So I actually kind of get.
You don't need a hospital to run these tests. I didn't go to a hospital. I went to, it was like a clinic. So it was basically like a little clinic that had 10 people working in it. It wasn't a hospital. But,
so
you
got tested. What was the result?
Yeah.
All right, brilliant.
I wouldn't have brought this up if it was positive.
Yeah, exactly. The NHS will be on you. You've got to self-isolate for more days.
My thinking was okay, cool. And then I flew on Friday. So I'm like, okay, cool. I am in the house, as you can tell now. And I don't, I'm pretty good about, exposure and whatnot. But I was very, very impressed by that. But even though that was a good experience, and even though I had a great time meeting people and going through a lot of actually really good legal documentation work, it's not enough to get me to move back to that place, man.
Yeah. And why wouldn't you move back? Is there a specific issue, or is it a collection of many issues? So
I generally have a way better quality of life here in the UK. Mm-hmm. I am a UK taxpayer. I've been, in this country 18 years. I've got the passport, so I am a British citizen. Therefore, I've got the right to complain about things, right? But yeah, I mean, this is home. I have 2 kids who are 12 and 10 years old. I'm not going anywhere. But even before I had kids, I had the opportunity to leave, and I wanted to stay. And it's once again, one of the best decisions I've ever made is to stay here and enjoy life in the UK.
Mm. So did you see any protesting when you went to America? Because during COVID, the rhythm was really, picking up for George Floyd protests, and then it fizzled out a bit. And then it came to the UK, tearing down monuments of, people who have been racist in the past. But did you see any, starts of ignitions of protests? Or
I didn't see any protests. But the time, so George Floyd was in May. Yeah. There was like you said, a big surge, but it seemed like things may have dwindled down. The other thing too is I was in a bit of a bubble. I was in like a very kind of privileged part of town.
Do you feel disappointed that the protests have fizzled down?
I don't feel disappointed. I feel disappointed if there's no government response in the positive to the protests. The protests, I think, are fantastic. Not just in the U.S. because, that's where a lot of this stuff goes down. These unjustified killings of unarmed Black men, of which I'm one, right? So, yeah, I definitely feel the weight of that police presence, even before George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, even before Amadou Diallo. I mean, so ever since I was a kid, I've felt a bit of tension from the police. I grew up in Los Angeles, and the LAPD does not have the best track record when it comes to dealing with people of color. So I've never been a victim of a police shooting. I have been intimidated a number of times by the cops. So this goes back into one of the reasons why I enjoy being in the UK. I don't have the same trepidation in dealing with police here that I do in the US.
I just want to put a side note in to say that the UK is not innocent at all. There have been deaths here, Azil Ford, Cynthia Jarrett. But yeah, are you saying then that you think it's better managed in the UK, or that there's a less likelihood of a Black man or a person of another ethnicity getting bugged by the police in an unjust way?
I think it's the latter, but because your racial history here is so different from what we've had in the U.S.
Yes,
so different. There's so many factors that go into the racial strife that we see in the U.S. and they're not mirrored here, thankfully. You don't want to have that kind of crap over here. Now, that said, I think it's good that people are protesting here, there, literally anywhere, anytime. It's a general statement, right? Anytime people have beef with their government, they should be able to take to the streets and make their opinions known.
I agree.
I don't like the property destruction.
So not the tearing down of the statues. You don't agree with that?
Now that's different for me. Property, because I'm thinking like buildings,
houses burning. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about property. So you've got a bunch of protesters here protesting really peacefully, using their freedom of speech right to try and evoke change in, the political parties. And then you've got a bunch of people here who go, I know, guys, let's just burn this building down. I believe that there's a clear line that's been crossed between those two versions of protesting. And I believe that no matter the reasons that people are burning down buildings, it actually harms the protesters that are protesting peacefully, because their message that they're trying to put across gets tainted by crime. Are you on the same wavelength with regards to that? Is that how you...
So the message gets diluted in the end, right? So on one side, peaceful protests. I've been involved in a number of peaceful protests. I've taken my kids to one of the climate marches recently. I'm a big believer in that. Make your voice heard. But when it comes to burning things down, it's like, okay, look, I understand why they do it to some extent. Sometimes people just get...
So do I.
And they need to lash out. And instead of hitting somebody or shooting somebody, which I know is an impulse, and we've seen that as well, they got to burn something or break a window. So I understand that there's that frustration that needs to be released, but I don't agree with it leading to property damage. because somebody's got to pay. And some people say, oh, it's just the insurance company. It's like, yeah, but that's somebody's business, dude. Somebody has put their heart and soul into that. Now, if you're burning down in the US, they were targeting. They were going after Target stores. They're literally called Target, right? So they were burning down Targets and
Target. We have them in Australia. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's an insurance company and it's not so much heart and soul behind it, but there were a lot of not just Black owned businesses, but just entrepreneurial businesses, one owner, sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
They're burnt to the ground. And that's a shame. That's a real tragedy.
Well, because I was just thinking, you said you're from Los Angeles, and in the early 90s, Watts and all that was probably, I think, one of the sort of like biggest examples of sort of just mass rioting, where people took to the streets and just destroyed shops. So like, not recklessly, but went around just destroying everybody's shops, not specific.
Yeah, that's right. The Watts riots were, I think, in '68, but you're thinking about Rodney.
Rodney King. Sorry.
Yeah. So we'll let you off the hook there. Yeah. So Rodney King. So Black man got beat by 4 different police officers in L.A. They were on trial. They were acquitted by the very first jury. People went absolutely haywire, as well they should, because it's ridiculous. These guys were caught on videotape hitting him just over 80 times. Yeah. Kicks, punches, police batons, beat the guy beyond recognition. Luckily, he survived. So then the riots happened. And I was actually in university at the time, even though, I'm from the city. And it was a real shame, because you're right. People, they just went out of their homes, and the first thing they saw was the corner shop. And so they started to to burn and loot, and which is it's a real shame there. There was I don't know if you guys knew about this though, but there were a lot of corner shops owned by Korean Americans.
Yeah.
In a lot of Black neighborhoods, and I can't remember this young girl's name, but it was a young Black girl.
Is it Latoya or something like that?
I really can't remember her name. I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
She's about 16 years old. She stole, allegedly, and even if she stole it, a bottle of orange juice from one of these stores. The Korean woman proprietor shot the girl and killed her. So it's like, okay, a bottle of orange juice. Really? You're gonna kill somebody over a bottle of orange juice? In America? Yeah. And that's a problem.
That is quite shocking, actually, to hear that. What you mentioned the statues as a different to property damage. I'd be really interested in hearing your opinions on the statues, because I have mine, but I would like to hear yours first.
So which statues, right? In the U.S., it's going to be these Confederate soldiers. And so, everybody, I think, knows the Confederate. So, back in the 1860, when the Civil War ended, I think 1863 in the U.S., the big war between the Confederates in the South, the Union Army in the North. Abraham Lincoln was the president at the time. Slavery was, thinking about abolishing slavery. Southern states went nuts and got all angry. And basically, what are they fighting over? To enslave an entire race of people. Yeah, there's the economic argument, but come on, it's about slavery.
Yeah.
Okay, so war breaks out because the South states wanted to secede. Lincoln said, "No, we're keeping this union together," and a civil war broke out. So in the South, there were a number of what I guess some people will call war heroes, and there are a number of statues commemorating their involvement in the Civil War. Just think about that for a minute. A war was fought and lost by the Southern states. Yet they rightfully want to commemorate that. How do you commemorate it is the question. You can put them in history books and people can learn about it. I got no problem with that. But you have these statues that are put up, which are celebrations of life, right? Celebration of the cause that these guys, all guys, believed in. How do you think that makes a Black person feel when you have a statue up that's commemorating the life of someone who wanted to enslave them?
I don't have to think. I've spoken to some of my mates, and they just think it's a kick in the teeth, which is exactly what it is. I mean, it in a similar fashion. What I compare it to is, okay, so there was a statue of Jimmy Savile when he was alive. Now, Jimmy Savile opened many children's hospitals with his money, and people around can justifiably see that as a good deed. However, the reason he did that was to use it as a place to abuse. Now, just because some people do some good things, now, okay, for example, one of those Confederate soldiers, although he's fighting to keep slavery, which is just an awful, repugnant thing that I hate even mentioning, he may have been protecting his family from someone one day against another soldier and protected his family and got shot in the line of duty. Now, just because he's done that one good thing, that does not outweigh what he was fighting for and the bad things that he intended to succeed over. So I think there's that throw up, you see? And I think that's what some people who are not racist but are not against racism have the issue with. And I think that's wrong. I think that no one good deed can outweigh a travesty such as slavery. And I think the exact same with Jimmy Savile, hence why I was happy when his statue was torn to the ground. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the way I look at it. Do you think that's a good way of looking at it?
But it's one of these things where, and this is where I think reason and logic really need to outweigh very real human emotions. So on a lot of the white Southern side, and even here, I've noticed it here too, where it's like, you're trying to erase our history, you're trying to erase our heritage. I'm not thinking that when I ask or demand that statue be taken down. I'm not trying to erase history. I'm trying to put that man's, and why is it always a guy, right? I'm trying to put that guy's deed or series of deeds or thoughts into context. I'm trying to put that statue into context. So let's have a conversation about it. One of the things I really dislike about often the other side is they're telling me what I'm thinking. You're trying to erase my history. And I say, no, I'm not. If you shut your mouth, I'll tell you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to do because people get all, they get all indignant about their position and you. And it's like, hang on, I'm happy to have a conversation. If you're happy to
should we just define what history is? Because we're talking about, erasing someone's history. Tearing down a statue that is in sense a glorification is not tearing down history, because you can still read about slavery. You can still read about World War I, World War II, what Winston Churchill did, his speeches. You can still read about this in history books. That's history. You're not erasing history. And may I also add that Dave, the rapper, said that in his song Black, I don't know if you heard it, that, essentially loads of Black history has been erased by white people. Right. So they cannot say anything about that. So glorifying a statue and having a glory statue is a lot different to reading about something in a history book. I think that's what you're trying to say. And that's why I would get angry. Let's maybe put it somewhere else. Cause I don't want to walk down the street and see that crap. Yeah. It's not just me exercising my will over you. It's just like, well, no, let's just kind of take a poll and see, because I'm not the only one who lives in this community. You, angry white person, aren't the only person who lives in this community either. Why don't we do the democratic thing and put it to a vote and see what happens? And then
I was just going to say, I think it's quite interesting because if you look at the Edward Colston statue, they actually fished that out of the harbour where it got dumped, and there's now actually a new piece of history that represents something else. They've sort of changed what it now represents. I think it feeds into sort of a modern idea of, well, we're not erasing history, we're just actually looking at it for what it is and then creating a new history, the present, but which will become history when we look back at it. And I think
that's a really interesting idea, Ed, actually. I like that. And I think if you did have any statues of the soldiers that Daiman were talking about up, they should be, cut in half or something to represent the dawn of a new age and the crushing of stereotypes. That's what I think. But anyway.
How, we normally don't have problem with updates. You update your wardrobe, you update your software package, you get a new car, you update your education. But when it comes to updating these divisive, figures in history, so many people have a difficult time with that. And I wonder why that is. It's like, why do you have such a hard time with us looking at those deeds? That is what has happened. But what has changed is how we generally view that. In the olden days, it was okay for women not to vote. Now we look at that and we think, yeah, that's wrong. That shouldn't happen. Let's update our thinking. So why is it so hard for these people to update their thinking?
Because of parents and grandparents, and for people, essentially, you know, if I said, okay, if someone said to me, okay, we're going to let women vote now, and I went, yeah, cool, that's fine, I don't really care either way. That's the problem, okay? If I said yes and I was an advocate of that, I think that's a really good idea, there would be a difference. Now, there's too many parents, and I've actually not experienced this with my parents, but I've experienced it with people close to me, of people saying, yeah, you know, they've got enough now, we've done a lot and we should just leave it there. And the amount of anger I can't even express that boils up in me, it actually makes me really sad to my core that I know people like that still have those ways of thinking. So I think that possibly there are many answers to it. It's not just one thing that's going to change it, but it really does need to start with the education of the new generation and the way that we parent our children.
I think that's right. I think it also takes an examination of white privilege. And I think more specifically, white male privilege. Because, you know, that statement that you made, I've heard people say that, oh, you know, you black people always complaining. What do you want? You want this, you want that, you want the other. What are you going to want tomorrow? It's just like, if you just take a minute and think about the position in your mind that allowed you to make that statement, you're giving things to me?
Yeah.
Okay, how about we have a little bit more equality in this equation? Rather than you, like a parent, giving me a weekly allowance of money, right? Because that's where it comes from.
Equality's a right; it doesn't deserve credit.
I'm giving you all this stuff out of, you know, the goodness of my heart, and you should be satisfied with. I tell you what, I'll be satisfied when all of this is equal. And if you honestly think that you're giving me something, we really need to have more equality. Yeah. So white privilege is a thing, right? And I've had a few chats with people.
It is.
Because, you know, a lot of white people, man, they start thinking, oh, I'm giving up. It's like, yeah, but dude, you're giving up something that you didn't even earn, right? Yeah. You're right. What did you earn?
It's interesting. White privilege actually breaks down within white privilege.
Oh, yeah.
So it actually is. So there are some white kids that experience more white privilege than other white kids. It's actually how it works. It breaks down into even more factions, which was weird for me because I noticed it when I was at school and stuff. You know, it's like, oh, this person is related to someone that was good friends with the royal family. Okay, you're going to be a prefect. Mm-hmm. Right, great. Okay, but what about this kid who's here on a scholarship, who's worked his bum off to write, you know, this whole essay on why he should be a good prefect? Well, what's going to happen to him? So I think prejudice is something, obviously it can be split into, you know, the black and white issue is a serious one, but it even splits into other, denominations that you can even see the mental mindset of thinking as simply as this person isn't as good as me. I think it's shocking, and I can understand why it will be a fight that will go on for years and years and years until it gets set right.
Absolutely. Because, you know, you think about it, right? You've got whatever it is you have. You've got your privilege, you've got your clothes, your car, and somebody's coming along who wants to take it from you. You're going to hold on to that with both hands. But if you just take a minute and think like, okay, what are they really asking for here? Have you taken something from them? Are they trying to get it back? Did your ancestors take it from their ancestors and they're trying to establish some equality? You put it in context and it takes on a slightly different dimension. The women getting the right to vote is another one that really kind of trips me out too. Because, you know, you think about like, oh, these magnanimous white men and they've given you women the right to vote. It's like, no, those women earn that. They earn that right. It's not yours to like give. It was never yours to take. That's the issue that I've got with a lot of, and it's white guys, right? Those are the ones who take and now think that they need to give. And once they're tired of giving, then all of a sudden the water hose is shut down and you don't get anymore. It's like, that's when I take to the streets. Because my thing is like, you shouldn't have taken it in the first damn place. It is not yours to give to me now, right? And that's
no, I think true words can be spoken. Ed and I actually hasn't been released yet, but we've done an episode of a movie review of American History X. Which is a film that we both watched, and we're both quite, it's a fantastic film, not just for its acting, but the way it displays the themes, not only of race, but just family relationships and relationships in general. We thought was great. I was wondering if you've seen it.
So I have a story about American History X. Yet another story. So you had asked me a while ago, what was my first job, I think. So being in LA, especially for that third year of law school, I wanted to network and try to figure out a way to find a job. So like London is centered around finance, LA is centered around entertainment. And just through my network, I knew some people who worked in the industry. My first job out of law school was at a movie studio called Savoy Pictures. And I worked in what was called the Business Affairs Department. So my job was to read through all these different contracts that the studio had with writers, producers, directors, what do they call above the line talent, actors and things like that. There were a few movies that Savoy had shot but never released. American History X was one of them. And if you go back and you look at the credits, my boss at the time negotiated a deal with, I can't remember who she sold the movie to, but she ended up selling it to another studio who then released it. But if you look at the credits, it'll say, whatever, Paramount or Sony in association with Savoy Pictures. Because Savoy was the studio that originally produced it. So fantastic. I really, really did like it. And it's disturbing as well.
It is. It was quite a heavy watch. I mean, Ed said there was some scenes where he really couldn't, watch it with essentially, you really had to grit your teeth and watch it. But what I liked about the film is it proved one thing that I think gives humanity some hope is that the people can change.
Oh yeah.
And that was something that made the film almost a happy film at the end. Obviously, the ending's really sad in the end, but it made it almost happy for a while. That seeing that progress can be made. Well, I was wondering what you felt about that theme of progress.
Yeah. So one of the central themes, you're right, is the character arc of Ed Norton's character. I love that guy. He's such a great actor.
He's such a good actor. Yeah.
We haven't seen enough of him, I don't think, of late. Nonetheless, but what does it take to undergo that kind of transformation? So for him, he went through two, right? He went from kind of normal everyday white boy to becoming this neo-Nazi to realizing the error of his ways. But his latter transformation, I think, is obviously the one, and it's self-awareness. It's like, questioning himself, like, what the hell do I stand for? Like, what is this? What do I want my legacy to be? And taking a minute and exercising that level of self-awareness is something that not just lawyers, but people, I think, really need to do more of. It's a bigger thing now. We're getting a little bit more holistic in our approach to life, I think, nowadays, which is great. But self-awareness is essential, because if you don't take a minute every once in a while, stop, question where you are, how you're doing, you do your own little check-in. How am I doing? You're just going to go off on this path, and before you know it, you got the potential to be a monster. We all do. So it's very important to exercise that self-awareness. And so that's one of the things I really enjoyed about his character.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we did quite an in-depth review of it, so we won't go too deep into it. But no, I thought it was a fantastic film, and it did represent a lot of the issues. There's a scene with his parents where his parents are saying, yeah, but you shouldn't be reading too much of that black literature that Mr. Sweeney gives you, it's all wrong. And that's when he was really young. So you can see how it kind of the pent-up rage of his upbringing just brought him to this climax of extreme racism. And then he goes into prison and he realizes that all the white supremacists are hanging out with the black guys and doing deals with them. And he realizes, no, it's not about this. It's just a bunch of losers who have nothing to do and are angry at the world for some reason. And they're just, I thought it was brilliant. But yeah, Edward Norton. Rounders. Have you seen Rounders?
Oh, yeah.
Fight Club.
Just real quick about Rounders, man. Honestly, I like Matt Damon, but I think that there were a number of scenes when the two of them were together where you could really tell that Ed Norton was Matt Damon, man, I love you, brother, but Ed Norton, hey, it is what it is, right? You know, I'm not an actor. If I were to be in a movie with Matt Damon, he'd outshine me. It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah. But Edward Norton is fantastic. Fight Club as well. What's the first rule of Fight Club?
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. We're halfway through the podcast going very, very well. I just want to talk to you about the possibility of you becoming the next best public speaker. Have you ever dreamed of being the next Boris Johnson? I bloody well hope not. But at least if you have public speaking skills, you'll be able to get up in front of tens of thousands of people and speak about what you want to speak about. Ed, tell us about Flamank.
Flamank Law Society is a great law society that helps get you information about future careers in the legal sector or sectors adjacent to that, if that's what you're looking for. They also hold moots, debates. We're getting negotiating, setting up, I think a little bit of advocacy on the side and other things, getting all that set up. And for the small price of £10, you can be a part of that. If you're not a member of the uni, it's only £15 to join, and you get all the same access to the same events, guest lecturers. Daiman comes in to talk about law, but I think at some point we might ask him to come in from Law Society as well, if that's all right with him. And it's just a great society to be a part of.
Yeah, all the links will be in the description at the end of the video. Also, I will be sure to put Ed Dempsey's Instagram involved for all those ladies that feel like looking at a bit of eye candy. Now, back to our guest, Daiman Baker. Daiman, going off the launch pad of, racism, what do you feel about the legalization of cannabis? I know California, it is legal in California, I believe, at the moment. But what do you feel about that spreading across the world?
I think it's a really good thing. You got to think about government resources, right? So and actually in a legal context as well. So it's one thing to have a law. It's another thing to enforce that law. And when it comes to something like cannabis, you think about, okay, why is it illegal? You have to question that. And you mentioned that it might be a racial issue. I totally get that. Back in the somebody's going to fact check this one, but there was a movie, I think, called Reefer Madness.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it caused a big stir and people got all nervous and paranoid and all this. And, in the U.S., and I can kind of just speak from that one, right? There were a lot of laws that were passed in like the olden days that were kind of puritanical in their origin. And that needs to be updated. It's just like the U.S. Constitution. That document was drafted over 200 years ago. Yes, it set up the Union, but over time, guess what? Things change. People change. Society's mores change. Therefore, our system of laws need to change as well. And so when it comes to legalization of cannabis, you got to think about, okay, number one, what does enforcement look like? What strides is law enforcement going? Like, what are they doing to control this thing? And is it worth it? Because they got limited resources. I, as a taxpayer, would much rather them use their precious, scarce resources on bringing rapists and murderers and child molesters to justice. And not, frankly, a bunch of young people, because I'm betting if you look at the demographic of the users, it's probably going to be younger people who are using cannabis. And you got to think it too about the comparison. So if you're not smoking, you might be drinking.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
And you go to any A&E in this country or emergency room in the US on a Friday or Saturday night, I'm willing to bet you're going to have more alcohol-related violent incidents or people showing up from alcohol-related incidents than you will from people smoking pot. Okay, so I'd much rather legalize pot because it's probably less of a burden on our system than alcohol. And who's it really harming? So take tobacco as the corollary, right? People want to smoke, they want to destroy their lungs. You let them smoke cigarettes. Why not let them get high? They're not going to be hurting people. And if you're worried about people smoking pot hurting people, then maybe you need to ban alcohol again, because we tried that in the U.S. with the 18th Amendment.
Prohibition, indeed.
And then they realized
that was a bit of a flop, if you don't mind me saying. Right?
Yeah. We're talking about how laws change and how viewpoints change and all that. Well, you did it with alcohol. passed the 18th Amendment, and then you passed the 21st when you abolished abolition, right? So times need to change. And I think that it's a great thing. States like California, Colorado, Nevada, who else? Is Oregon in there?
Yeah.
I'm not too sure. You have to ask Ed. He's our smart guy.
There you go. So good thing. Tax revenues are going to go up. You're going to have law enforcement focused on what I would call real crime, like violent crime.
Yeah.
And you won't have a generation of people, or maybe even a race of people, I think that's where you were going with it, Linus, being stigmatized over something that I think is pretty innocuous. Last thing I want to say about legalization of pot, I was talking to my kids about it last night. So my daughter's 12, she'll be 13 next month. My son is 10. And in my daughter's school, she's year 8, they're talking about drugs and getting the kids to understand, you know, not the evils of drugs, but more the risks. And I'm like, okay, that's a good way to pitch it. And so I said, you know, guys, I think it's a really good thing that marijuana is legalized. And I gave them my argument as to why. The point is, am I encouraging them to go and use it? Some people might argue that I am. Is that a bad thing? I'd much rather my kids get high than drunk, frankly. You know what I mean? Seriously. And I'm not even joking when I say that, because I think the health, the risks to their health are less than if they're getting hammered and going out driving and things like that. But anyway, that's another conversation potentially. But we talked about it. And this is just a small little parenting aside. I'd much rather my kids talk to me and feel comfortable talking to me about this stuff than it all have to go underground and they talk secretly.
Hide it. No, I agree. I think that, I mean, my views on cannabis might differ to Ed slightly, but I think that the fact, I mean, me personally, I feel safer if I smoke a joint than if I was to get drunk. I've been both. I don't drink at all pretty much anymore. And I haven't really smoked in a long, long time. But I think that from my knowledge, the effects on your body is much worse when you're drinking alcohol. I mean, a doctor can try and challenge me, but as we said, you know, how many people do you see in A&E with, you know, alcohol-related issues compared to how many people you see in A&E with pot-related issues? We had Nick Clark on who was talking about it. I mean, he says that pot's pretty much saved his life. He's a schizophrenic. He just said that, you know, without it, he thinks he'd be dead because it just calms him down. It mellows him out. I mean, what are your experiences with marijuana personally, if you're comfortable with talking about that?
Oh, absolutely. So when was the first time? This is so fun. Another story, man. Oh, man. You're taking...
No, it's brilliant.
I don't know, like 80 years kind of thing. So when I was growing up, I skied a lot. My parents got into skiing, and I started ski racing. And as part of that, I went to 3 different summer ski camps, one in a place in Oregon called Mount Hood, Oregon, back in the summer of '84. And then I went to Whistler up in Canada, in BC, in the summer of '85 and the summer of '86. The reason why that's relevant is because the summer of '86 is the first time I smoked pot. But get this, I smoked pot with a Mormon. It was a Mormon guy who I smoked pot with the first time. I didn't get high, but it was really funny to me. I mean, it's like, and his dad was like an arch Mormon. His dad was like a professor at Brigham Young University, which is like the big Mormon university in Salt Lake City. And I just thought it was quite ironic that this Mormon kid got me high, or, you know, smoke. But yeah, but I've smoked, you know, through college and everything like that, because it was fun. It was social. And I did feel, it's interesting that you say that. I did feel maybe not more in control, but I did not put myself at risk as much when I was smoking as when I was drunk. And that's why I'm thinking, you know what, maybe there's something in that, because what do? You smoke, you sit on the couch and you look at TV and you eat a bunch of Doritos. Honestly, man, or listen to music. But I'm not, my first thought is not, oh, let me go outside and like drive my car or go and just do some risky behavior. It's the opposite. I just want to chill out. And so it's got a very chilling effect, and not chilling like not in a negative way, but it chills it chills you out. Now, granted, I'm almost 50 now. I'm not nearly smoking as much as I used to, but I don't feel the same stigma as I did when I was younger. And I think that that's a good thing. It's like people are kind of cluing in that it ain't that bad.
I think, yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I know personally, if I take a shot of vodka, that night is a write-off, because I'll definitely take another shot and then probably another, and the chances of me going up to my room doing some late night work or planning my next day are nil, and the chances of me smashing a window or breaking something or going completely nuts are high. Whereas if you take a toke, yeah, of course your efficiency is going to be down, but still at least you feel as though you're somewhat in control of what you're doing and what you're getting done. So I think that's really good. And it's also proven that it helps with, it can have both side effects on anxiety and good things on anxiety, but it's proven that it can help anxiety and help with loads of, mental health issues as well. So I think that if a state or a country hasn't legalized marijuana, you heard it here on the Verdict podcast, you're behind and you need to get with the program. With the race issue though, for black men in America, especially being thrown in jail for, being in possession, of a 20 bag or something. Do you think it's just ridiculous?
It is. It's a shame. And, and I think in the U.S., and even here, I'd say too, marijuana is very much in parallel with rap culture or urban culture or hip hop or, whatever, people use other disparaging terms, rap, hip hop, urban culture, not disparaging. Let me just be clear about that. But I think that a lot of rappers, they're like, they talk about getting high, and I don't see the problem with that. But I think a lot of suburban white parents really start to draw that connection and get nervous that their, precious sons and daughters are going to all of a sudden turn into like black people or something. I don't know what they think, frankly. But there's this fear factor that comes in with it. Why? Because if you smoke pot, you must be a rapper. The world's going to end. I think that obviously not all, don't get all excited, but some white parents think that. And
well, my experience is the opposite. It's if you're a rapper, you must smoke pot. So, it's kind of, it can be a bit disconcerting. And the problem is the people that usually say that usually know pretty much F all about what they're talking about, and also don't understand when they're putting on a jazz record and going, this is the type of music we should be listening to, that Louis Armstrong used to smoke a joint every time before he went on stage. So I usually go with the education first and then the dismissal later. But yeah, I think that there won't be full legalization in America for a while, because they use it to what I talked about on one of my records. My Black Lives Matter record is the, new form of slavery, essentially, which is police brutality and, arresting people for marijuana usage. Because in the Constitution, although it states, all men are free, it also states that all men or women should be arrested if they are breaking the law, and marijuana is a way to perceive people as breaking the law and essentially put them in new metaphorical change that is the US prison system, in my opinion.
Have you seen the documentary 13?
Yeah, by Ava DuVernay. Yeah, brilliant. I'd recommend it to anyone listening.
Absolutely essential viewing.
Yeah.
I think.
Because it discusses that, it takes back to the Civil War and sort of like the slavery, and then how it changed to lynching, I think was the next one they discussed.
So real quick on that one. So the 13th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, the 13th outlawed slavery and vestiges of slavery they use. And then the 14th Amendment, there's this very important clause called the Equal Protection Clause. People have equal protection under the law. But then there's this little... in the 13th Amendment, there's this clause that's, we should fact check this one, but it talks about how no person shall be like unjustly, is it imprisoned?
I think so, yeah.
But there's a clause in there that basically carves out if you are incarcerated.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
And that clause has been used to amazingly paralyzing effect in the US with specific regard to Black males. So the idea there is you cannot be mistreated under the law, unless you're a prisoner. And so in the US, there has been this a very large amount of not free but cheap labor, almost indentured servitude, right? That has crept up since the 1863, 1865, something around that time, when the 13th Amendment was passed. Very scary thing, because it's all done under the law.
Yeah. I've got one more question just regarding cannabis, because I know you want to get onto muting and the stock market. It's not really about cannabis, more about race. I forgot to ask you earlier. If someone was racist to you, if someone gives you a derogatory comment about the color of your skin or whatever, is your first reaction to be angry and attack them, or to educate?
It has run the gamut, right? Because I've had a lot of experiences over the years where people have used racist language to me. Yep. And so I'm gonna tell you some of these stories because it depends, right? And like any human being, I don't always get it. Sometimes I've gone off the hook and swung at people and gotten into fights over it. Other times I've been a little bit more measured. There was one particular instance I was so proud, not just of me, but of the other guy. So I used to, when I was in college, for a little short while, I was a valet parker of cars. You know, I'd park cars, and it was at a bar. So as you can imagine, a lot of people coming out of that bar were hammered. Mm-hmm. And I got to see some of the worst of humanity when I worked valet parking cars at this joint. One night, I'm standing outside, and I hear this commotion inside the bar. And I hear, I think I heard him. I heard this guy first. And I heard him go, wait, how are we with language on the podcast?
Go, whatever you want to say. Go.
Okay, cool. He's like, fuck that nigger, fuck him. And I was just like, what's going on? And I look and I see this short Asian, so he's like a Chinese American, Korean American, Japanese American guy coming out of the bar, and he has this big white guy friend with him. I wasn't really intimidated by the Asian guy, but the white guy was the issue. I was like, oh dear. But he wasn't saying anything. He was just kind of like hustling the guy out. Fuck that nigger. And so I thought, wow, there's obviously a problem that the Asian man is having with a man of color in the bar. That was it. So it was logic that was kicked in at that point. And by instinct, I took my hands, I put them in my pockets, and I walked up to the guy. And remember, his back is to me because he's looking in the bar. And I kind of nudged him like this, and I took a step back. As soon as he turned around, he was on the defensive because he thought I was going to like attack him. Why? Because I'm a black man and he's using the N-word. And I hands in my pockets, right? And I said something like, hey man, you're obviously having a problem with the black man inside the bar. I said, but by using that term, you're not only offending him, you're offending me. And I had nothing to do with it. Mm. And at that moment, dude, it was really, I felt so proud. Like I said, not just of me, but of him, because his whole demeanor changed and his shoulders dropped. And he said, you're right, I'm sorry. And that could have turned into a very negative interaction, probably for me, because if I'd attacked the small Asian guy, the big white guy would have taken me out, right? But he and I both learned something in that moment. Now, this happened when I was about 19. That was 30 years ago, and I still remember it. All that to say, it depends on the situation. Mm. But logic can prevail. Mm. That's my message there.
I think that's a really strong story, actually. I'm really glad you told that story. I think it's really interesting. And not to just completely move away from the racism talk, but I know you did want to talk about mooting. So what were your experiences of mooting at uni?
No, not at uni, at law school for us.
Oh, law school.
Because, in the US it's different. We have 4 or 5 years of uni, and then we have 3 years of just dedicated law school. And moot court and mock trial were big things. And I will tell you this one because there's a public speaking angle. First year of law school, we all had to do what was called moot court, which is basically appellate level argument. So mock trial is different. It's a trial. So, you have witnesses who are like your friends and things like that, and you have to produce evidence and all that. But in moot court, which is the appellate level, you're only arguing the law. Did the lower court apply the right law? Did they apply the law correctly? Yes or no? And so we had to do moot court first year of school. because we didn't know what we were doing, they paired, so it was me and a teammate, and they paired us off with a team of older law students so that they could kind of guide us on how to be better in the moot court setting. So they were like tutors in a way. So they said, okay, for the first time we all meet, it's going to be our team, another team, and the 2 older students. And we want you to prepare just like a 5-minute speech of some type, just so we can get a feel for how you are public speaking. And I prepared something, and I went in, and it was a room of 6 people, right? But I was so nervous. I was flubbing my words. And I remember thinking, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because, I have a high opinion of myself. Why not? And I'm like, God, dude, come on, you're not bringing it. You are not bringing it. Yeah. I'm really angry with myself. And I made a promise in that moment. I was like, I am never going to be this nervous when I'm public speaking ever again. And I've taken opportunities to get into the public speaking. I really think it's a key skill, because it's not just standing up in front of a room of people. There's preparation, there's confidence, there's clarity of thought. There's so many things that you bring to bear when you do public speaking. And now, now I'm like, give me the mic, 200 people.
Yeah.
Mic, because I got something to say.
I want to talk.
I do. So I really
Hello, America.
Give me the mic. I do. I really enjoy it now. And I wouldn't have gotten to this point had it not been for that formative experience back when I was first year in law school. So yes, there's that angle. Public speaking, good thing.
Because during secondary
everyone
school,
join the Public Speaking Society. Link will be in the description. You've heard what Damon said. It's crucial. It's crucial.
Sorry, then I'm going to jump on the moot court thing. And so then I really did enjoy moot courts. And I did a couple of moot court competitions when I was in first year. And our team didn't do so well. I mean, we got to like the quarterfinals or something like that, but I really enjoyed it. And so then second year, there was the opportunity to join like a national moot court competition. And so, each school would put together like 1 or 2 teams and then send them to the nationals. And our team was invited I ended up going to Chicago that year. And I argued, and, there were only a couple of rounds that our team did at that point. But one of the rounds, I was scored like the highest. And I felt really good about that, because it was like a national level competition. I held my shit together, right? I did. And it was a confidence booster, but it was also a great opportunity just to see how other people do it. And that's another thing I'm just going to say about one of the differences I've noticed in law school, undergrad, law school, business school. Undergrad, what did I really learn? I learned discipline. I learned how to socialize. I learned independence. I don't remember a lot of the material I learned in undergrad. In law school, I learned a way of thinking, spot the issue, try to keep focused. Knowing the law is essential, but I learned a way of thinking and a way of kind of holding myself. But in business school, half of what I learned was in the classroom, but the other half I learned from the other students. And so I really enjoyed each of those 3 for that reason. The learning and the different ways and the different people. And, each one has its benefit, I must say. But in law school, in moot court, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. And it's a challenge. You get yourself out of your comfort zone. You never know what new skill you're going to pick up.
well, I was just going to say, public speaking's never been one of my fortes personally. It's not something I've ever really liked doing. But I got to uni, law business course, and you get there, and you've met Anton, the mooting director for Mank, who I'd say was born to talk in front of an audience. And
absolutely.
Yeah. You start realizing how important it is to be able to get up on stage and be elegant in how you talk and be able to hold a room captive with your words, especially as a lawyer, because it's something, if you're a barrister like Linus wants to be, it's something you have to be able to do regularly. So yeah, I think personally it's just going out of your way to sort of get yourself to that stage, sort of consciously aware of the fact that you might be nervous, but once you get up on stage, you've just got to perform the job given to you. I'd
like to add something to that, Ed. Specifically, and someone I I came to uni with extreme experience in public speaking and thinking that I was, the bomb at public speaking, and nothing could faze me because I've spoken and rapped in front of crowds of, great numbers of people. But Anton taught me something about public speaking that I found quite interesting, because when I watched him in court, I was against him. I was the legal counsel against Anton. And the way he formulates an argument and the words he uses and his posture were things that I tried to add to my repertoire after watching Anton. And I think that speaks volumes to something that many people don't think about with regards to law. It's not just about you and the way you convey your argument. You also have to consider the way the opposition is conveying their argument and the way they're using their public speaking skills. Because you may find yourself being disadvantaged from the type of experience you've had with public speaking skills. Mine was speeches, getting up on stage, going, Now, confidence is great, but in a court, the type of public speaking you need is much more refined and much more narrow. And Anton's been helping me with my public speaking, because he is someone that in a court, he is the boss, the don, when it comes to public speaking. But yeah, well, so you developed your public speaking skills, Daiman. What do you think of my method of essentially, if someone is bad at public speaking or is nervous, essentially just putting them in front of bigger and bigger crowds until they learn to deal with it, essentially?
Well, like any skill, you need to have, I think, training, right? You need to, and I've done that a number of times. I'm just gone on courses, as it were. I mean, I've been fortunate because working in investment banks in London, I had access to a lot of public speaking courses. Some of them were good, some of them were crap, but in the end, it was learning from someone. So it's interesting that you make that point about Anton, because it also made me think of another context that I've been in, which where I experienced accelerated learning, but it's a little bit non-standard. So for about 10 years, I did this fighting style called Krav Maga.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I know.
Right. And one of the things about whatever you take, I think self-defense is good, but anytime you're sparring with someone else, in your context, you were verbally sparring with Anton, but anytime you're sparring with somebody else, you learn little tricks, little things. And it's not like classroom learning, right? It's learning by doing, it's learning by getting your ass kicked, it's learning by losing, but it's in real time.
I didn't lose. I just want to make that clear. I did not lose.
I was on the other team. You did lose.
No. We're not getting into this. I reduced the settlement down by like 30 grand. I was a draw at best.
I was there. You can't make stuff up.
No, Ed, we're not discussing this now, okay? We'll discuss it with Anton again. I did not lose. All right, continue, Daiman. Sorry.
Ed, I believe you, Ed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent.
It's my client one.
So in Krav or in moot court or mock trial settings, you learn so much about another person. And what does that require, right? It requires self-awareness, and it requires you to put your ego on the back seat, because you don't know everything. And even if you think you know a lot, that's great. You still have more to learn. And so I think it's essential that you create that space to where you can learn from your colleagues and from others. I mean,
there have been many times in my life where I go into something thinking, well, this is gonna be whatever, mate. I'm just gonna go up there, stand up, do my thing, and come out. And there was a public speaking competition at school, and I went in, I did a speech. It was fine. I never have a paper with me or anything. I just kind of freestyle it after rehearsing it over and over again. And I lost. I came last, dead last. And it was like the worst experience of my life. But instead of cowering in the corner and moping about it, I tried to learn, and I ended up winning like the big competition at school. And if I hadn't learned from my opponents, I went up and spoke to them. I wanted to know what they did differently to me. Was it hand gestures? What was it? Was it posture? And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have ended up winning the big competition. So I think what you're saying about opponents is really important. Tell me, do you watch MMA?
Sometimes I do. Yeah. Sometimes I do. I can't help it, man. I'm like, I shouldn't want, but I like watching it sometimes, not a lot.
Are you a fan of Conor McGregor?
He's a good fighter, but he's just too much of a showman, I think. It's like, you have to have some humility. I think he needs to have a lot more respect for his opponents.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I've heard from people that, he actually does have a great deal of respect for his opponents after. But there's I can see what you mean. Yeah. But the mental game that he plays is one that I think is actually transferable to the law. And it's not a mental game as in going, who the fuck is this guy? No, it's none of that. But it's more, what do you feel about being presentable? So it's a mental game. If you're going in a negotiation room with a big company and you're representing counsel, coming in with shirt button undone, for example, coming in with, not having your tie done up fully, not having your suit ironed well. What do you feel about that? That's kind of a mental game.
It is. But see, to me, I think the gamesmanship is with yourself. I think that's where it's more effective.
Okay.
Because what do you have control over? You don't have control over how they perceive you. Now, I get that you've got to, you got to get your suit and you got to look right and all that stuff. But what I've found is more useful is when I'm getting suited up, I'm feeling like I'm going into battle. It's my mental preparation that matters more than, are they going to like my suit or are they going to be intimidated by my suit? I don't give a shit. I feel good going into that room. That's all that matters. Right?
It's not about looking like $1 million. It's about feeling like $1 million.
I can't tell you how many times I've been on the other side, and I was never in a courtroom as a lawyer, right? For me, it was always more transactional. I'd rather get to a deal than beat the other person up. But I have been in some situations that were adversarial, and I've noticed that a lot of times, and it's the guys, almost always the guys, come in like, oh, I'm all that, and yeah. They're so interested in being all pumped up and puffed up and trying to intimidate me that they lose sight of the key issue. And man, there was, the analogy there is you the big fighter who comes in talking all the shit, and the quiet one is just watching, looking for the weakness, waiting for his or her moment to strike at that weak point. And 9 times out of 10, they'll hit it.
Yeah.
And the, Goliath will just collapse and then wonder why.
Yeah. I mean, I went to court in Truro and I watched 2 barristers. There was this old guy, okay, really not old as in ancient, but he was clearly a seasoned barrister, the grey hair, nice suit, double-breasted, really appreciated it. And then the young guy comes in and he's like, looking around like, what's going on here? I'm ready to...
I'm the man.
Yeah. Anyway, young guy does a really good argument. He does it very well. He's very aggressive stance, though, really confrontational. And the old guy just comes in with this very soothing tone, says, good morning, Your Honour. I just wanted to say thank you for taking this time to hear our quarrel. And he just talks and talks, and he talks so charmingly. Yeah. He's talking to they have this witness, and this witness is so just captured by this barrister that she doesn't realise. Yeah. She ends up giving herself up accidentally, and the barrister suddenly switches up and goes, "Oh, so you are saying?" And it just like goes off, and I'm like, "That's the answer." Being the charming, calm, and measured person rather than coming in all guns blazing. And that young barrister was like looking around like he couldn't believe what had just happened. And yeah,
got backhanded. I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, different styles for different folks. Sometimes that very aggressive style works. It depends on the context, right? I've seen that style to great effect in a non-courtroom setting. So like in settlement negotiations. There's in fact, the Dallas thing, just real quick. One of my buddies was saying there's a couple of lawyers in Dallas who are known for just being like that, like junkyard dogs. And the other side just gets so fed up with how obnoxious they are. They're just like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I just fell for it. Right. Yeah. So sometimes
I think that's as well. It's about knowing your audience, which is probably the skill that I hold in greatest regard for anything I do is, knowing who you're actually conveying a message to. So the way that, Ed and I would conduct ourselves in court is a lot different to the way we conduct ourselves over, a podcast, or the way in which, I conduct myself doing a public a public speaking, thing or a speech is a lot different to how I'd be on stage if I'm performing. So I think it's all about knowing who your target audience is, or who your clients are, or what goal you're essentially trying to achieve. So I find that really interesting. It's good hearing first-hand experience, about that. Let's move on to the stock market.
We're talking about markets.
yeah. Have you got a portfolio running at the moment, Damien?
Yeah, I do. So let me tell you about my approach to investing, right? So I've been working in banks in London for 17 and a half years, I think now. And I've learned a little bit. I've learned enough to be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
But for me, like my preferred method of investing is using ETFs, exchange traded funds. And the reason why I like exchange traded funds is because you can buy basically one stock, like you would a BT share or, Apple share. But with an ETF, you get diversified exposure. You have to choose the right ETF, right? But I like ETFs. You have what's called intraday liquidity. You can buy and sell in the same day. You're not locked into something for a long time. And at least I can be pretty specific about what exposure I want. So there's another guy, and you have to look this dude up in the background. His name is Ray Dalio. And Ray Dalio runs a very large hedge fund. He's got over 100 billion assets under management. And he's a smart guy. And he has, at one point in his life, when did he do this? It was a few years ago. He kind of exposed some of his approaches to investing. And he came up with some portfolio suggestions. So, pie chart, right? You might want to think about having 60% in fixed income, 30% in equities, maybe 10% in commodities, right? I'm being general here. But I took one of Ray Dalio's kind of like formulaic portfolios, and I applied it to my life. So let's just take, say, as an example, he said, you might want to have 60% in equities. Oh, no, actually, he said 60% fixed income, sorry. So I was like, okay, but what bonds do I want? Do I want corporate bond exposure? Do I want government bond exposure? If so, what geography? Right. So for me, I've got a couple of different fixed income ETF holdings. One is on inflation-linked gilts. The other is on 15-year and more gilts. So when you're thinking about bonds, oftentimes people will ask you duration. You have to look this up in the background, but it's basically, when do those bonds come mature? Have you guys heard of the yield curve?
I've probably heard of a similar term. I don't know. Is this an American term? No. Are you talking about when the yield hits its kind of maximum velocity?
No. So what you do is it's in bond. Think about bond markets. Think about government bond markets, right? And you have government bonds that are short dated. So, they come mature next year or what have you. And then you have government bonds that are mid and then longer dated. And so oftentimes, depending on how volatile a particular economy is, the yield curve will change because people will be buying longer dated bonds, or they'll be buying more short dated bonds. But the yield curve, in government bonds at least, changes given changes in demand, typical supply demand stuff. So oftentimes, if people are really nervous about what's going on in an economy, they'll say that the yield curve is inverted, which means that short-dated bonds are more in favor than longer-dated bonds. Why? Because people are really nervous about what's happening tomorrow. But if things are pretty comfortable, and that's kind of like the normal state of affairs, then your yield curve will show longer-dated government bonds having a higher yield. People are willing to wait a little bit longer. They're not feeling they're living in a very stressful or risky time. Massive overgeneralization. But the point is, start looking into yield curve, start looking into duration, and you'll understand how bond market dynamics are. So keeping that in mind, I was like, what kind of fixed income bond exposure am I looking for? I wanted government, and I wanted a mix. So I wanted the inflation-linked part. Obvious reasons, inflation goes up, my return goes up. It's low risk stuff. I'm not going to say no risk. It's low risk. And then I also wanted the 15-year. Why? Because I'm looking at retiring in more than 15 years. I'm going to change that around, but that's where I started with fixed income. On the equity side, it's like, okay, what equity exposure do I want? So then you think thematically, right? I love renewable energy. And I was looking around for clean energy ETFs specifically. So I bought into a clean energy ETF. I've bought into, I think I've got an S&P, the S&P 500.
Yeah. I've got a clean energy iShares government tracker bond, and then I've got the property, and what was the other one? What did you mention after clean energy?
S&P 500.
Yeah, an S&P 500. Yeah. So, but they're like, I think that I like to consider them like my foundation ones. So like, as in my ones that are like always going to be there, like, or maybe add an extra £1 a year or whatever, and just see where that goes. Yeah. And then you've got your speculative ones. You've got a couple of speculative ones, and then you've got, a few large companies that you like to keep balanced as possible. One goes up, one goes down, and swapping that around. But I don't know.
Invest in single stocks. To me, that's, I'm not an equity analyst. That's not what I do. I've got some tech exposure too. So like a tech kind of ETF. So I've got, in that'll be the big ones, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, that kind of thing. Netflix, I think, is in there too. But it's all a fund. So I don't have to worry about picking individual stocks. I buy one ETF and I get diversified exposure. So I've got those equities. And then I've got a little bit in gold. And then there's another one that's, a general commodities ETF. Now, rebalancing is easy, right? Because I can buy and sell stuff in a day, and that's not a big problem. Earlier in my life, so about 10 years ago, I had more risky assets because I was like, oh my God. I mean, I had, China equity exposure, which brought me 40% up one year, and then it started to drop, and so I got out of it. But I didn't want to get into that game of watching markets every single day and worrying about if I had my exposure right. So when the Dalio thing came up, I thought, you know what, let me just do that. Take a portfolio view. Things are going to go up and down on a daily basis. I'm not too worried about it because my time horizon is a little bit longer. And so that's one of the key messages there is think about your time horizon. You guys are young. You can do all kinds of risky trades right now.
Yeah, well, it's time to make mistakes now when you're dealing with 15 quid rather than like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can't even imagine it. Just be like, oh my God. We were talking with John. We talked with John a lot about this. He's saying like it takes a certain amount of mental dexterity to watch something plummet. Mm-hmm. So let's say I've got like a
Tesla.
Let's say I've got a Tesla share, like, and I'm watching it just plummet and plummet. It's going from -£1 to -£5. It's just going down and down. What do I do? Well, the person that's not mentally strong would sell, and they'd be wrong. They'd lose that money. But the person that is mentally strong would sell their Amazon shares, which are up, and buy more Tesla and watch it go down even more. But it was interesting talking to him because he was talking about similar stuff to you, the rebalancing, keeping a balanced portfolio, how important that is, and having a strategy and making mistakes when you're young and when you're not dealing with massive funds.
That's right.
So, yeah.
There's another term you should look up called mean reversion.
I'm writing these down, so I'll write this one down.
I think that's an important concept to kind of get your head around because it helps you weather the storm. Stock markets are they're volatile. They go up and they go down. But if you look on the long term, so I'm not sure if maybe from your point of view, it's this way. They've tracked up. There's only one direction the stock markets have gone over the last 80 years, right? Up. There's been downs, but they are
blips,
local in nature. Yeah. And so if you think that stock markets, if you believe in what they've done over the last, almost century, if you think that trend is going to continue, you can weather those temporary lows. Because why? Performance will tend to revert to the mean. And if the mean is on an upward trajectory, you can ride out the storm because at some point in the future, maybe not next year even, it's going to go up. So I'm not too worried about volatility. But I also kind of manage volatility based on my holdings. So, I've got fixed income, I've got some equity, a little bit of commodities and whatnot. But I'm not a big believer in taking massive bets on one company. I'm not a hedge. I don't think like a hedge fund guy does. And that's another.
Do you not have Tesla shares?
I don't know Tesla shares.
Why not?
Because I don't do single stocks.
Yeah.
But Tesla might be a component in one of my ETFs. I'm trying to think of which one it would even be.
I was thinking it must be with the way Tesla's performing at the moment. Right?
I don't know if it's in any of my ETFs, frankly, but I don't care because like anything, there's so many opportunities. I don't make money on Tesla. Okay, I didn't make money when Facebook went.
Yeah,
it's like, what are you going to do? You can't live your life thinking about all the missed opportunities. Oh, you can live your life that way, but it's not going to be very full.
You'll lose. Can I do a word association with you, David?
Let's do it. You're going to edit this all out, right?
Money.
Something I want more of.
Risk.
Take it, but be smart about it.
Mental health.
Absolutely essential to live a full life.
Education.
Absolutely essential to live a full life.
Networking.
Absolutely essential to living a full life. But let me give you a little bit more on that one. Honestly, networking is not just a way to open up opportunities. It's a way for you to help other people. Let me just give a quick word on networking because I think it's something a lot of young people miss is you think, what can that person do for me? No way. When you're networking, think, what can I do for that person? You have to make yourself valuable to other people in order for your network to find value in you, right? And then people will come out of the woodwork and start to ask you questions and provide you opportunities. But you have to give, you have to serve first. That's one of the key messages of networking.
That's similar to what Stephen was saying, wasn't it, Ed?
Yesterday we were talking to a venture capitalist who basically just reflected what you were saying. We discussed it a bit more with him because it's like quite a big bit of his job relies around networking, but like to the extremes where he worked for Channel 4 and then worked for a venture capital firm. So we knew like Jennifer Aniston to local tech startups. It was a really wide network of people, but he reflected the same thing. It's making sure that it works both ways, making sure that you don't just sort of like spread your bets.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just going, oh yeah, can I get some work experience, please? He said it's more, but someone's going to be more interested in you if you go, look, I'm really interested in what you do here. I've actually done some research here on that part of your market, and I thought it might be interesting if I present that to you. It's about starting the conversation, which is what I think you're trying to say, Daiman.
Yeah, it's showing value. I think demonstrating value to people is so much more. You're going to have more stickability. Then if you go in like, what can you do for me? It's like, oh, please, dude.
Yeah.
Nothing. Goodbye.
Yeah. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Alcohol.
Something I enjoy drinking, just not as much as before.
Drugs.
Something I sometimes engage in, but not as much as before. Stock. Learn before you buy.
Tax.
Based on fundamental fairness, and I do not mind paying my fair share.
Okay, interesting. London.
Great place to be in your 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, but proceed with caution.
Constitution.
Backbone of any worthwhile society.
Racism.
Mm-hmm. Cancerous.
I agree. Debt.
Can provide you opportunities in the short term, but get rid of it as quickly as you can so that it does not become a cancer to your long-term growth and potential.
And finally, legacy.
Legacy, something I work on every day. Hope I get it right. In the end, my kids are going to be the final arbiters of my legacy.
Brilliant. Well, I've only got one more question, but I'm going to let Ed ask questions if he's got any before we start to wrap it up.
Yeah, I was just the answers to some of the word sections associations I thought were quite interesting, especially London one. Do you think there's maybe somewhere where when you get a bit older, you start moving towards the countryside, or it's like living your life a bit separate from the hustle and bustle of the city?
Well, I'm a big believer in having a diversity of friends and experiences. And if you put yourself in one place for too long, you're not doing yourself you're doing yourself a disservice, right? So London, like LA, is a great city to be in, but for a limited amount of time, because it's just one place in this amazing world of ours. So that's why I say great place to be in your 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, but proceed with caution, because before you know it, you could be 70 years old, still in London, and you're missing out a lot. So it's a great place, fantastic place. And I think you should spend time there. But just know that it ain't the only great place on earth.
Right.
You know what? Before we go, debt. That's a big one, I think.
Oh, yeah, debt.
Honestly, debt it's seductive in some ways. It's easy money up front. You can use it to finance your education, to buy a car, to buy a house. But from personal experience, I wasn't good managing my personal debt.
Yeah, you said Americans' attitude to debt is a lot different to the UK in our previous conversation.
Big time. We're a lot more cavalier about it, right? Oh, yeah, I'm in debt. Yeah, whatever. Credit cards. How many do you have? Oh, 4 or 5 of them. It's not a big deal. I'll pay it off one day. And dude, the amount of money I've paid on interest, I could have bought a number of rental properties. But instead I'm paying debt, right? So it is seductive. It's so easy to get into, and it's a lot harder to get out of than a lot of people think. It's one of those things, there were people who would say, oh, you got to be careful. And I'm like, yeah. And typical hard-headed 20-year-old, I know everything, you old fool. What are you talking about? And then when it hit me a little later in life, I was like, wow, you know what? They were right. It's so easy for me to say this. It's a lot harder for you to implement it, but just run the numbers. And think about where you would rather your money go to in the future, to interest payments or to buying lovely suits or going on killer holidays and things like that. I had to make a lot of changes in my spending over the last 2 years because of my debt load. And I do regret it. It's not the end of the world. I've got, I think, decent earning potential, and I can pay it back and have paid a lot of it. But I just think about the opportunity cost. There's a lot I put on interest. Damn, I could have gone to Antarctica. Yeah. So proceed. I've
got one more question for you, Daiman. If you were a diamond, right? Okay, so I want you to picture yourself as a diamond, all right? And there are 2 events for you as a diamond in your life. One of them is you getting your shine, you're becoming, one of the greatest built-up diamonds in the world. And the other is the diamond smashing on the floor and shattering into 1 million pieces. Are there 2 events that can transfer those pictures in your mind to your life? Can you connect up those dots?
To where I shined, and then another one where I was feeling like I'd been smashed into 1 million pieces?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So one of them, there's a lot of shining moments. In my more immediate past, it's the birth of my children. So some people might not find value in this, but I do. I was present and an active participant in the births of both of my kids. That to me is a real source of pride. I was there for them, and I said to each of them when they came out of my ex-wife, when she first delivered them, each of them I said, welcome to the world. And, they didn't understand me. They didn't understand words at that point. But to have been in the room and been involved during the birth of my children were experiences that made me feel on top of a mountain. I felt great, absolutely great. And I love my kids dearly. So many lessons I want to teach them, but it started in those moments when they first came into this world. Where I felt like 1 million pieces busted, honestly, that's in my recent past as well. It was pre-COVID, and the industry that I was, the sub-industry I was working in London, I was doing a lot of regulatory consulting work. I would work as a consultant to banks, and that market dried up, and it felt like it dried up overnight. But what did not dry up were my bills. And I was sitting there like, I got this pot of money and it's dwindling quickly because I was spending way too much. And there were a number of nights where I was really worried about not putting food on the table. It didn't get that bad, but it got real tough, man. Because, I was running out of money. And how am I going to pay for all this stuff? And how am I going to be able to support not just me, but my ex-wife? And I started to think, what have I done? What have I done here? I'm not in jail or I haven't killed anybody, but this isn't the life I promised you 10 years ago we'd be living. That was a hard conversation that I had to have with myself. But the key is what did I do after that? So I had self-awareness kicked in. I had to make some changes. But that was it. So luckily, it's not me killing someone or me going to jail. It's not that level of falling that I've had to deal with. For me, it was just more financial, and it was me being financially irresponsible. And I had to face up to that shit and make some changes.
Well, I'm really glad that you did. It shows true dexterity and a lot of self-awareness, which I think integrity and self-awareness are skills that lawyers and many careers alike, it's required heavily. I'd like to thank you, from both Exeter and the Verdict podcast for being such a great guest and constantly coming in to see us and talking to us about your great life and everything you've done and all your career and everything. It's been so interesting. Thank you so much, Daiman.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for listening to me ramble for a couple of hours.
No, it's brilliant. It's not rambling at all. So, Ed, what did you think of Daiman Baker? I mean, we know him quite well. We've got a bit of a rapport with him, but it was a brilliant episode, I thought.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to him. He's such a knowledgeable and well-spoken chap that it's just, we always discuss something of interest because we did a call like this in August when we were discussing having him as a guest. And it went to an hour and a half because we just all got so ingratiated.
He's so engaging.
Yeah,
he has engaging. I think it's his tranquil voice and his calmness that just makes you think like you're on some Chesterfield couch with a cigar and a nice scotch and you're just chilling out with a guy you've known for years. It's brilliant. He's one of my favorite type of guests. I think it went really well. We here at the Verdict podcast are really interested in you guys listening to our content and benefiting from our content. And that is why we're always really informative and leave our links in the description of the video. Obviously, Ed had a banging night out last night and was slightly hungover, but it didn't affect his ability to provide very insightful comments. Our Instagrams, the Verdict's Instagram, the YouTube, the Facebook, and the LinkedIn will all be dropped in at the end of the video. And before we sign off, we've just got to say that Flamank and the Public Speaking Society are perfect opportunities for law students, business students, and any type of student, as it will give you skills that are valuable in the workplace. I'd just like to say a warm goodbye from me, Linus Lampe, the Triple L.
Bye from me, Edward Dempsey.
And we will see you soon. Thank you.